Okay, I hope you can all see the screen with my presentation. So I'm not going to go into full presentation mode. I hope you will not mind that. I find it a bit easier to control when I can see it like this. Um, Now, and then I see also we have some of our friends from the FTAO here today. In case you should find anything you wish to add or correct, please don't hesitate to raise your hand, Virginia or Mia. And of course, also questions that you think are pertinent. Maybe you could also add them towards the end. That would be very valuable for us. So please don't hesitate, and thank you for participating. Now, I wanted to start out by pointing out the difference between some of the different EU legislations in the sense that the EU Deforestation Regulation is, as it says, a regulation. Means it's not something that will be transposed into a membership member states' national law in the same manner as a directive usually functions. I will not go too far into what that means, what a directive means, because we're not dealing with a directive here. But it means that the European Commission is the one enforcing the law in this case. Very simply put, I know there are more elements to that, but simply this is a bit supposed to help us understand what we're dealing with. Because if it was a directive, there would be several more instances of enforcement in each member state, but this is not the case for a regulation. And so that's just what I want you to take away from this. Importantly, a company does not have to be based in the EU to be covered by this regulation, so long as they're placing a product on the EU single market in some form or fashion. Then that product is covered. But this is par for the course for most regulation that or directives, for that matter, that will affect companies operating on the European market, on the EU single market. Indeed, to make sure that EU-based companies do not have higher regulation than those outside the EU, or at least attempt to make sure that's the case. Now, I just want to make sure that we all agree on what exactly deforestation and deforestation-free means in the context of this regulation. So deforestation is conversion of forest to agricultural use, whether human-induced or not. Essentially logging to make way for either having grazing cattle or other farming activity. And deforestation-free then means that the product that is placed on the EU single market has not contributed to the conversion of forest to agricultural use. Meaning, if it's, for example, beef, leather, or animal-derived products, that it has not been fed with something that has caused the conversion of forest to agricultural use, like soy, and that it has not, or that the product itself has not been grown in an area where this has contributed to deforestation, or that it does not contain some specific elements that could also have contributed to deforestation. And the cutoff date for when this deforestation cannot have occurred is December 31st of 2020. Please allow me to get back to that point a little bit later, because I think it'll be more relevant later on. But if I forget to do so, please don't hesitate to remind me. I do believe that there is a point later on in my presentation that covers this a little, or where this is more relevant to look at. Now, in terms of scope, there are 7 primary risk commodities that are affected by this regulation, where let's say that is looked upon in terms of whether they have contributed to deforestation when they are placed on the EU market. So cattle-derived products, and that includes leather, cocoa, coffee, palm oil, and derivatives, and then rubber, soy, and of course, wood itself. But certain, let's just say, sorry, I said that leather is exempt. From what I understand, actually, it isn't. We'll just take that away. But there is in some of the documents I've read, there's a bit of ambiguity over this. I hope maybe, Virginia, you can help us with this. Sometimes wooden products are exempt. Depends on how big a part the wood makes in the crafts, for example. Uh, Notably, partly wood furniture is exempt, for example. And then cotton and man-made cellulose fibers, like viscose and lyocell, for example, are also not in the scope, but there is some indication that these products could be included later on. I mean, cotton and man-made, or let's say human-made cellulose fibers. Actually, the regulation has been approved and entered into force already in 23. Nevertheless, the implementation date was originally set to be, well, it was actually set to be December 31st of 2024, then moved to 25. So that means the end of this month. Um, from a recent vote, however, last week, we learned that most likely this will be extended again until the end of 26. And then there is another 6 months transition period for small micro enterprises, which means then that would be June of 2027. I believe this is due to be confirmed either this week or the next. But Virginia, maybe you can note in the chat if you have more details on that. So most likely this is, let's say, less urgent than we thought, which is, of course, makes it easier for companies like yours. But there is, of course, some concern over the fact that this keeps getting postponed, and that in essence we do agree that products should not contribute to deforestation. But there are some technical, I know, difficulties for at least many smaller companies that probably some of you have already also struggled with. We'll get into that. And so, okay, it does mean that there's a little bit longer time to figure out how that works. Now, the requirements for this regulation are that products, especially those in of the 7 key risk categories, must be deforestation free. Okay, goes by a little bit by the name, but they must also. It's also supposed that the company ensures that they are legally produced, meaning they comply with the laws within the country of origin. And all of this is supposed to be documented by a due diligence statement made by the operator that first places the product on the EU single market. I'll get into that in a short while, what exactly that means. Yeah, okay, this is here. Now there is a little bit of let's say there's a small difference for smaller companies and larger companies, as well as smaller plots and larger plots, in terms of their requirements. Amongst the first on the that it mustn't contribute to deforestation, this is generally documented by providing the exact location of the farm or the plot of land where the farming activity takes place, or where the cattle is grazing, if we're talking about beef and leather. For smaller plots, less than 4 hectares or acres, then a single set of coordinates is acceptable to document where the farm is located, let's say. And for larger farms, the extent, the boundaries of the plot has to be outlined by several coordinate points. So that should form a kind of shape that outlines the borders of the plot of land or the farm where the product is derived from, so long as it's for larger than 4 hectares or acres. Just a small note. I understand that there could be a small difference in size between acres and hectares. So in that case, hectares but I believe in practice they are almost the same. But just in case I am wrong, please go by hectares and not by acres. Now, the way that then this is supposed to be enforced is that with satellite data, any loss of forestation, let's say, loss of trees is expected to become visible in the satellite imagery when looking at those coordinates. And if it is detected that a significant loss of trees occurs at some point at a specific plot or farm that is entered into the system, then it is deemed that the farming activity has contributed to deforestation, and the products from that plot or farm will be banned then from being placed on the EU single market. And that goes for all products or derivatives that comes from that plot or farm. So this is a bit like how the geolocation works. That's why it's documentation goes by providing the coordinates, because then it can be monitored by satellite image is a bit the logic. Due diligence comprises several elements. The first one on basic information of the goods, what it contains, how it was grown, and then the geolocation of the farm along with a certain other basic information. Then it has to include a risk assessment on different risks in connection with the production and the farming, among it, of course, deforestation, a set of risk mitigation, either measures or arguments on how the risks are being assessed and addressed. And then this is put into the due diligence statement, which is what is reported in compliance with the regulation on online platform that the Commission has set up. And some of you may know that this system has been part of the excuse for the delay, at least last time, because evidently it was not quite geared to receive the amount of information that is expected to come in from the reporting on this. It seems that this has been fixed, however. Nevertheless, the delay this time seems to come from rather again big players saying that they need more time to implement this regulation correctly. And then fortunately, I also believe that there is some agreement amongst the EU co-legislators that more expert advice should be sought in the implementation of this regulation. So it could be that the worst, let's say, basic issues and flaws in the system that has been set up will be addressed in the meantime, and better information on how to provide the correct information and what kind of geolocation services can are acknowledged or accepted as valid and as secure enough will also hopefully be outlined in that time. Let's see. There is one, let's say, main positive development that I know that at least some of you have had many questions about recently. There's been an agreement on, and so again, from what I understand, this is not confirmed yet, but hopefully will be confirmed, at least this part, in this week or the next, that there are some simplified requirements for small holders so long as they are in low-risk countries. Let's see. I'll try to show the map here, which is courtesy of a consultancy called Finboot. That shows the low-risk countries, the standard-risk countries, and the high-risk countries. As you can see, most countries are low-risk. In Latin America, especially Central America, and then big parts of Africa, we do have some standard-risk countries, along with Indonesia, notably. And I believe this is Malaysia, which is also in the standard risk. So for these countries, this simplified requirement does not hold, and they have to abide by the original requirements of providing exact coordinates for small farms and a demarcation of the boundaries of the farm when they are larger than 4 hectares. The simplified requirement, well, you can read it here, is that it's a one-time declaration, and then that the geolocation for geolocation, postal code of the establishment or of the plot can be accepted instead of coordinates, which I know would be a tremendous easing of the burden for some producers, also in the WTO network. Let me see. I just wanted to prompt also one of the key questions we've had from members in relation to compliance with this regulation. There are certain producers. In this case, I believe the example came from Indonesia. So they would be in the standard risk group, and so this could not be solved by the simplified compliance method or simplified sorry, the word escapes me. Yeah, declaration, sorry. Of location of the point, sorry, the question that came up here was in case that producers simply like make wooden products where they buy the wood from the local market. This is their go-to source for the raw material, for wood as a raw material. And they're not really in a position to get the information on where does the seller, the vendor of that wood, actually get the wood from. So obviously, what would in any case be the sort of approach is that the producers we need to prompt the producers to ask questions to the vendor where they get the wood from. And at some point, it should be possible to locate the sawmill and then get information from that sawmill where they get the raw wood from. Where do they log it? Or most likely somebody logs it for them. Now, problem here, I think, derives also of the certainty of that information, because in terms of geolocation, oftentimes also, or with the online system, there will be a need to ensure the original data, and most of the time, the reliance for ensuring that the data is reliable, that it doesn't change along the different people involved in the production of different goods, is to use blockchain technologies. And that may not also be so openly available in areas like these, if we are in very rural areas. I don't necessarily have an answer to exactly how this works, except to say that this is where buyers. So for those of you in the audience that are buyers, will have to support also their producers in figuring out in prompting them to ask where they get their materials from, and to try to figure out how they can get good answers and reach the original source of the products. There's no real way around this, so long as we're looking at a risk category product or raw material. Now, maybe I should reiterate that in case we are talking about crafts, then if they are partly wood, generally speaking, they're not covered. But if they are solely made of wood, of course, we have to assume that they will be covered, and so steps will have to be taken. That might require some time, but from the information that I have, I don't see a real way around having to engage with them in how they ask the right questions from the people they buy from, or assisting them with how they can be put in touch with a more established company that provides wood. That could come with an increase in raw material prices, of course. But if it means that traceability can be ensured, and the relevant information can be documented by the place where they get the raw materials, that is a compromise that I think is necessary to make. But maybe this is something we can do later on. But I just prompt you to keep this in mind. And if any of you have either experience with this yourselves as well, not necessarily in the same way, but with producers who have a raw material for the products you're buying from them, or if any of you are producers that are working with a raw material that would be covered under this regulation, and you're a little bit in this position that you know where you get it, but you don't know where the vendor gets it. The people you're buying it from, you don't know where they get it. So essentially, there's no way for you to look into the chain of custody. Then please share it when we get a little bit to a question phase, because we'd be very interested in hearing more experiences, potential solutions that any of you either have thought of or tried out in practice. And in any case, the best way we can approach this kind of dilemma, which I think maybe more of you will be facing than you might think, is to brainstorm it collectively. And then with different suggestions, we can make a research on whether that would hold up towards the requirements of the regulation or not. So I'm hoping we can create a positive feedback loop this way. Good. Now, the Gateway to Fair Trade Fashion project is the basis of this webinar, as with the last two webinars that I know some of you at least have joined. So naturally, I'm supposed to look a little bit more specifically at the fashion sector in this case, where mainly leather and rubber will be the relevant commodities that will fall under this regulation. For some fashion, we could say companies that do accessories, for example, some pure wood products might also fall under this under the scope of the regulation. But so far, cotton and man-made cellulosic fibers will not be covered. But again, if you are working especially with human-made cellulosic fibers, lyocell, viscose, and I believe there's a few more common ones with the names elude me, please excuse me. Then I do suggest still that you make an effort to look into the same questions, and especially the chain of custody, the origin of the source material, and of course, in the case of MMCFs, that means also locating the origin of the wood, because this could come into scope of the regulation. I know that maybe the current climate in the EU and Europe in general, maybe say even the most of the world, is not exactly to go in a green direction, at least not right now. So it is possible that this will never become the scope, part of the scope. But let's say we do all, I believe, have some concern for the environment and especially also to not contribute to climate change, but rather to do climate action. So naturally, I would advise you to look into this. And if that just means that you would, at the same time, be better prepared for an upcoming extension of this regulation, I think that's just positive. But deforestation is a problem. I'm sure that many of your producers could tell you the same, depending on where they're working. So it is indeed something we want to contribute to. And many of the same practices, of course, would hold for these categories as for others. But just to say that for now, I think the relevance for WFTO members is somewhat limited, because I know that not so many work with leather and rubber. But these are the key commodities that will be concerned when we're talking about the fashion sector. Now, whichever commodity we are talking about, but this is especially for cotton cellulosic fibers. Um, what we generally would advise is to look at re or upcycling of materials. This is also relevant for eco-design, and it could ease your life tremendously in terms of the hurdle with geolocation. Um, Now, for those of you who did not attend the eco-design webinar, the idea is in any case that um, several products, and those include especially garments and textiles, should have either, or preferably both, enhanced durability, but also enhanced recyclability, or that the reuse of the materials should be made easier. Um, More modular design is also encouraged so that different parts can be easily replaced in case they either become obsolete or damaged or worn. I understand this is maybe less. I mean, this part of the regulation is more made with electronics in mind. In this case, sorry, this part of the directive, because the eco design is indeed a directive. No, sorry, sorry, please, I'm getting confused. Sorry, the eco design is also part of a regulation. Um, Good. So the point remains the same. That this regulation is made more with electronics in mind. Nevertheless, it can be thought into, I mean, it does cover textiles and garments as well, and can be thought into that in terms of how garments could be made more easily repairable, which can also be a way to increase customer loyalty, for example, if there is some offer of relatively cheap reparation of worn garments further down the line. There will also be several requirements that have to do with how to handle the product after end of life. So when it can no longer be used by people, how will it either be recycled or upcycled? Or if that is not possible, then how will it be disposed of? And producers will also have, I'm talking here about maybe, let's say, producers in terms of those who place it on the European market, whether they actually produce the product or if they are more the brand that sells the product, will also have some obligations to either contribute to that in terms of some fees that are paid, some kind of tax, or any other provisions that could, for example, take up, like take back products after they have expired, simply after they can no longer be used, recycled or upcycled. And then it's the responsibility of the company to dispose of it responsibly or or upcycle it if at all possible. Geolocation, we know, is one of the key issues with this regulation, specifically the deforestation regulation, of course. We advise that you work closely with producers already now to find solutions for that. Solutions can be numerous. Actually, also, I would like to emphasize that Fair Trade International has a project in which they are looking into compliance like this, for example. We just double check what it is called. And they are willing to extend the offer of several webinars that looks into this also to WFTO members. So I will send out more information on that later. But just to double check. I think it's called Fair Thrive. Yeah, funded by the European Commission. So more information will follow on that. And hopefully that can help also find solutions for many of you. I do believe that in some cases, this is a service that needs to be bought from certain providers, from certain consultancies, but there might be other workarounds. So But for that, I will refer you to either more information that we will send later on, or these also the trainings that FI will organize in connection with their project. And then another one practice that I know some WFTO producers have already begun doing is to use certified raw materials. In this case, Forest Stewardship Council certified wood, where I think this is on the next one as well. Yes, I'd just like to note that certification is a good addition, but it's not a replacement. Still, the rest of the parts of the due diligence statement will still need to be filed. Again, the responsibility is on the operator that first puts it on the EU market, the EU single market. But the point with the Forest Stewardship Council certification, for example, there are also other bodies that help with the same kind of thing, is that they do indeed include geolocation of the forest of origin, and there is a chain of custody with this certification. So it helps with the traceability. But for the rest of the requirements, this is still the responsibility of the primary operator. So it's not just that if you have, for example, FSC certified wood as your raw material, everything will be a walk in the park. But it is a relatively easy, let's say, first step to dealing with geolocation. Although we also understand that it's, of course, a costly way, or at least can be more costly than other ways of sourcing raw materials, especially in terms of wood. Now, I do believe I've come to the end, except that I want to launch a Mentimeter with some questions that I'd like all of us to ponder in this case. And then, of course, take questions and maybe discuss some of the questions of the Mentimeter afterwards. Now, first, I will just return to the point of the first operator, or let's say the operator. The regulation talks specifically about operators that put the product on the EU market for the first time. Let me just see if I can find the infographic I wanted to use for showing that. In the meantime, any questions you might have, now is a good time to put it in the chat. Okay, thank you, Isabella, for monitoring the chat.
Yes, I didn't see much questions in there. There's two remarks. One says there is two cumulative requirements for the micro and small operator category, must be in low risk country, plus must place directly the products in the EU market. So yes, I think you addressed that in your presentation. And the question here is, what is the turnover threshold to be categorized as MSME?
So this is here we go. I think the EU has a quite clear-cut definition for this. Let me share a link that I believe outlines it. Yeah. Here it is, more or less. So there is a threshold in terms of staff and of turnover or balance sheet. And yeah, for micro, less than 10 people of staff, less or equal to 2 million in turnover or balance sheet. For small, it's less than 50. And for medium sized, it's less than 250 and less or equal to 50 million in turnover or 43 million in euros, that is, in balance sheet. So that's the ultimate threshold, that more than 250 people of staff and more than 50 million in turnover or balance sheet, then you're no longer in the category of SME or MSME, let's say. So this is the ultimate threshold that you must be below.
So from our understanding, we're still in the category. We all are, I'm presuming.
Yes, I think there is very few members in the European membership that would go beyond this category. Yes. Here we go. I believe the original infographic is from a presentation the European Commission itself made in when informing and making different types of info sessions about this regulation. But in this case, it comes from a organization or consultancy called CDP. I had to zoom in quite a lot. I don't know if it's clear to you, but you can. This takes the example of cocoa, where you have the cocoa farm, and they deliver it usually to a cooperative of some kind of sort, and then the beans are exported to the EU, where a company imports it, and that's the operator in this case. The point I'm trying to make is that in many cases of WTO members, for example, if they buy from a WTO producer or non-WTO producer, whatever, outside the EU, and then wants to sell their product in the EU, the operator is usually the buyer, not the producer itself. There are a few cases, I think, where the producer itself can be the operator if they if they sell directly to consumers, I think would be the distinction on the EU market. I think there are a few cases of this in our membership, but I'm not so sure actually. I think most of the time members, whether outside the EU or in the EU, have some kind of buyer, which would be the operator in this case. And the responsibility for the due diligence statement then lies with that operator. That's the first operator to put it on the EU market. So, for example, a WTO member could import from producers products that falls under the risk categories. They are then the first operator to put it on the EU single market. They have to produce the due diligence statement and get the relevant information from the producers, of course. So the producers will still have to provide certain data. But the responsibility with the due diligence statement and the obligations lie with the operator. So that means in this case the WTO member. Now that WTO member can also sell it to other retailers, WTO or not, in Europe, in the EU, on the EU single market. And in that case, the responsibility still lies with the first operator, and other operators then just have an obligation to refer back to the original due diligence statement. And this all functions through the online portal that the EC has set up. But I think this distinction is pretty important because it means that in many cases, this is rather an exercise where if you're a producer of WTO, your buyers in the EU will have to collaborate closely with you to get the relevant information, but they're still the ones that have to submit it to the European Commission. If you're a WTO member in Europe that buys from producers, then you are the one responsible. And okay, the producers still have to provide much of the information, of course, but it's your responsibility to get it from them, let's say. And what we suggest is that you collaborate very closely with them already now to make sure that they are in a position to provide you that information in a way that does not burden them. So the point here is that the responsibility should not be passed on to the first producers. This is also stated I believe, in the agreement that came last week. And which hopefully should be confirmed. Well, let's say, which we expect to be confirmed. That there should be a clear guard against the bias in the EU, putting the burden of proof on the first producers, let's say, the upstream operators in the supply chain. Upstream being here close to raw material production, and downstream being close to the consumers, of course, placing it on the market. Just in case that's unclear for anyone. At least I remember first time I heard about this way of talking about supply chains, it was not obviously clear to me from the get-go. So I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding about that, that upstream means close to producer and downstream is close to consumer, or those who buy it in the end. Good. I hope that is amply clear. Otherwise, let me know in the chat if you have any questions regarding this. There is, let me just mention, also a possibility that there can be representatives, and I think here we're talking about trade associations, can on behalf of their members manage due diligence statements if they have been given a clear mandate from the members. So there can be a possibility, I suppose, to discuss within WFTO the possibility of WFTO assisting with this kind of thing. But maybe I should emphasize that this is in any case something that would be up to decision by the broader membership. And so something that would have to be proposed to WFTO Global. But I'm just saying that, okay, there is also this aspect of the regulation, and that is something that can be contemplated, and that's something that at least I could envision discussing with Global, whether that is something we can look into if it turns out that many members find that it's overly burdensome for them to comply individually with this regulation. But I don't want to make any promises on this, but just to give you the full picture of what this regulation look like. That's also a possibility that certain organizations or associations can do that on behalf of members. But certainly also I will just say that in any case, the responsibility for providing the information would still rest with the first operator in any case. So it frees up some administrative work, so to speak, to do it this way, but not the collection of documentation and of information in the first place. So just to emphasize that that would not be a silver bullet either way, or a magic solution. Let me see. Yes. Isabel, please remind me, did we emphasize what Virginia wrote? That's what you meant, right? That the two cumulative requirements. I did mention those. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Good. Okay. And then, yeah, there's the question if textiles are covered. And in the current form, but Virginia, please correct me if I'm wrong. In the current form, they are not. As I mentioned, cotton fibers, for example. The point is that this refers to primarily agricultural products. And of course, let's say, not just in terms of plants, but also animal produce. But for animal produce, it's about cattle specifically. For the agricultural products, it's the ones that I highlighted in the beginning. Let me show that again, just briefly. Because this is, of course, the important point. It's also what I was saying before in the terms of the relevance for the fashion sector. Actually, the relevant, like, I don't want to say that it's will not have a significant impact on the fashion sector, but at least in terms of like the areas affected, it would be quite limited. As I mentioned, leather, because it comes from cattle, is, from what I understand, a commodity covered as among the risk commodities. But as I mentioned, cotton and cellulose fibers, lyocell, viscose, other types of fibers that are made from wood pulp are not covered. I think I could add here paper is covered, but books, for example, are not covered. But as you can see, otherwise it's commodities like cocoa, coffee, palm oil, soy, which is mainly a commodity actually for cattle feed, for example, or animal feed. Although, of course, also sometimes for human feed. Depends on the product. Um, but then otherwise it's rubber, and then potentially that's covered. Other textiles are for now not, but we assume, or rather, there is an indication that the scope could be expanded to especially these, because the environmental impact of the fashion sector and especially textiles, garments, where cotton is the most prevalent fiber, I believe it's outside of polyester. Um, it's well known that that the impact there is significant, and that also deforestation is directly linked to some of these supply chains. So this is a criticism that has been made of the current regulation. So we can only expect that it will be covered. But for now, it is not. Again, as I mentioned, out of our general approach to um, doing less environmental harm from our practices as fair trade enterprises, and to combat climate change, or like contribute to climate action. For this reason, mainly, we would still highly encourage you to adopt the same practices as for commodities that fall under this, so long as they don't place like unnecessarily, um, uh, let's say, high burdens on your producers. Like, for example, geolocation could be something that increases costs, depending on how you can go about it, what tools you have to use, and especially if you will have to um, uh, verify the, let's say, the accuracy of the original data. It's not, sorry, it's not really accuracy, sorry, but what I'm trying to say is that if it's necessary to use blockchain, for example, to ensure that the original data cannot be changed, if you have to go through a chain of custody, like several steps in the supply chain, okay, that will most likely introduce additional costs, but you can maybe expect that that will be something that will be necessary later down, like further down the line anyway. So even if it does introduce some extra cost, it might be useful to look into, um, for that reason. Um, but for the rest, to the extent that you can ensure and document that your products do not contribute to deforestation, even if they're not covered by the scope, we would highly encourage you to do so. Okay. Any further questions for now? Sorry, now I lost view of the chat.
No, we are good, Mikkel. There is no more questions.
Perfect.
I'm sorry,
And
just one arrived
yes,
now.
from Sibdas Bala again.
Yes.
And the short answer is yes. Organizations dealing with exempt items do not have to submit any declaration. I mean, if the item is not covered in the scope of the regulation, then yes, you do not need to submit a due diligence statement. That's for products that are or commodities that are covered by the scope that the requirements apply to. So the short answer is textiles one of those commodities? No, it is not covered. So no, you would not need to submit this. But again, preparing for the eventuality that you might need to do so in the future is probably a good thing. And in any case, making sure that whether you want to document it or not, that you do not contribute to deforestation from your production, again, is also really something we encourage. Now, I would like to delve into a few questions using a Mentimeter here. Some of them are a bit general, but it's really just to prompt you a little bit on asking some of the questions that could help you understand what kind of practices you need to introduce, or generally what things you have to ponder as an organization to prepare you for compliance with eco-design, but also, for example, with EUDR. Now, I'll just put the link in the chat as well, in case some of you are either joining from your phone and so can't scan the QR code, or do not want to use your phone for scanning the QR code. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Sorry, I was slow. So the link is out already in the chat, thanks to Robert. I will just maybe stop sharing here and then go to the Mentimeter itself.
Okay, that's my answer. So I am inviting everybody to add their what are they doing for their sustainability, because I know for sure that each and every one of the WFTO members have a big concern for the sustainability and the environment. So I'm sure everybody is doing some different things.
Indeed, please don't hesitate. And the different types of answers can be quite broad. It can also be that you are looking into the impact of your current practices and to try to assess which of them should be changed. There we go. No plastic. Yeah, very good. This is one issue we are still working on with I mean, other organization more than us, but we are following as well on the eco design regulation on the product environmental footprint, where I think currently it's not in the regulation, but we know that generally the models that companies use for bigger companies use for determining the environmental footprint of their raw materials. In terms of garments, polyester somehow score higher than cotton out of, I think, the references to water use, for example. And then also that polyester is more durable than cotton. However, if you factor in a lot of other aspects of polyester, which is a plastic essentially, or an oil-derived product, this view does not quite hold up, that it has a lower environmental footprint of than cotton, for example, than natural fibers. So this is just something that came to mind when somebody wrote no plastic. In the eco design, there is a little bit of a fear that there could be an advantage for plastic-based fibers. But we are partnering with those that are very much against this development, and doing their best to advocate to the European Commission against any preference for polyesters in the eco design and the PEF, the product environmental footprint criteria. Very good. Okay, let's move on then. Sorry, let me just see if I can. Yeah, on freight, actually, that's a good point. And this is in any case something that we also have in our standard, that members are encouraged to use freight by sea rather by air, out of of course, the emissions linked to using air transport. So that's good to see. And this is also something we encourage generally. There are various forms of this. There are also some who use partly wind-based sea freight. And I say partly because they still use engines to make sure that they can comply with modern schedules, let's say. And so that we are not back to the 18th century. But they do also use partly wind to reduce fuel consumption during the journey. Just saying that there are actually many levels of this. Other use like invest in or pay a little bit extra for freight where they use biofuels of different kinds. So less reliance on original fossil fuels. But yeah, just to say that there are actually a range of different practices that can be used there. Good. Then let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking at. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I hope you can see the next question, or you can go to the next question on whether you collect or report on environmental data, in particular carbon footprint. Okay, at least we have two respondents, and one that they collect data and one that they report. And I assume that maybe many aren't, it means many aren't collecting this data. Now, I'd highly encourage you to consider ways to collect that, and maybe Isabella, for example, do assume that this is something you do at Sustainable Journey. This is also something where we can maybe outline some of the best practices we have from the members. Next question. Again, collect or report on environmental data on materials used. This is linked a little bit to eco-design, where we are prompting you to consider the materials you're using and the footprint of those, linked to what I said about polyester. I don't know, Isabella, if you're the one that says report, or if whom is the one that says you report.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, please. No, I was just to ask if you can share some of the aspects that you're reporting on. Like, what specifically is it?
Well, to be honest, for me, it was a very difficult process to get to where we are right now. The first one is within Sustainable Journey when we talk about, recycled textiles we collect from the different hotels. So yes, we have to report on how much we collected, where did it come from, etc., etc. And then thankfully we had assistance of a local university, who helped us make sense on how to deal with that data and then what it means at the end. So there is a software which is called Sigma Pro they're using, where we can input a little bit like a story about where the materials came from, how much they were on a truck, what's the kilometers, what was done with them, in which type of workshop they were transformed, so that we know, for example, their electricity bill and et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, at the end of the day, this program spits up a nice report saying that by reusing those waste material, you were able to save X amount of carbon or water or chemical use, because we compare it to virgin material. So it's not easy. I tried to do it on my small business side, on the Bebemos side, where we handmade toys with organic cotton, and we use polyester stuffing in there. So here it's again a little bit, I'm not sure how much we can trust. It was more with the help of AI, where we assessed how much material we used and what was the quote unquote footprint of that material for our products. So two different approaches, one a little bit more professional with a specialized software, and the other one a little bit more, counted with spreadsheets and then fed into AI and asked for some input. So there are different approaches, and I think at our level, we should start somewhere, even though it feels overwhelming. At least filling up those spreadsheets with the kilos and the amounts and the pieces and stuff. And then hopefully find ways to kind of explore that data. But everything starts with the collection of the data and as much information as we can, because even the distance from the hotel to our workshop or to a workshop is important in that case scenario. And sometimes we saw that, if the hotel was very, very far away and those materials would be sitting on a truck for hours and hours and hours, it doesn't matter that we actually used discarded materials, because that truck emitted so much carbon that it wasn't making much difference. So there is a lot of decisions, and there is a lot of information which it can give to a business as well. So I highly encourage everybody, even though it feels overwhelming, at least it does to me. I don't know how the others are feeling. Even though it feels overwhelming, to start somewhere and to start collecting some data points, even very basic.
Indeed. I think the point is very good that you say that sometimes what seems like a sustainable choice may not be sustainable after all, or at least not the most sustainable. Depends heavily on different factors, and if you at least collect data on it, you have a better idea of the actual impact you might have. Maybe you can put what was the company called, the tool that you're using? Was it Sigma?
Sigma Pro, yeah, it
Okay.
is a very expensive tool, and some companies, I'm gonna write it in the chat.
It's
Sigma,
because in the research I did, I saw this come up as well.
yeah.
So it can be at least give an indication of what you can look for, and hopefully there can be cheaper alternative tools.
Yes, there are also people who who owe the licenses for this program, and you can also pay them a small amount of money just for one usage and get the thing. It exists on the internet. There are service providers who, you don't have to buy the Sigma Pro because that's very very expensive.
Mm.
And if we want to use it once a year, it makes sense to ask a consultant who have access, or a university. Most of the sustainability universities which are working around the sustainability and climate, they do have access to those. This was our case, and they were kind enough to let us use and help us write those different scenarios to see what was happening. So it might be a good way to kind of save money or not to spend money, reaching to your local universities when and if they have departments in those areas. It's a good exercise for them and their students as well. So usually they're very welcoming, people asking, hey, can you help me calculate carbon footprint or environmental footprint for my products?
Indeed, and I know that some universities are quite keen because this is a kind of undeveloped research area in some cases where they're very keen to look into it. So that could be a win-win, let's say. Okay, we have the next question. Maybe I can also I advise you to maybe just quickly respond. Otherwise, we can move on because I think, again, maybe some of you get the point here on whether you collect a report on data on recycled content. So again, in your case, Isabella, I'm sure you do because you use recycled materials. But I highly encourage others to also consider this. This is also why with the recommendation on maybe look at recycled or upcycled materials first, that for your raw materials in cases where you're looking at risk commodities, for example, for the EUDR, that could be one approach. Here, of course, you have to keep in mind the kind of cutoff date for the regulation, that deforestation must not have occurred after December 31st, 2020. So in case you are dealing with recycled material of a risk commodity, if you are unsure that it is not older than 2020, okay, maybe this will not help you in the first instance. But if it's recycled content where there is a due diligence statement for this regulation, which as of today, there won't be any, but a few years from now, this could be the case. Then it would help you circumvent or overcome the burden of geolocalization, for example, if you use. But then, of course, this may be less available in countries of producers. Depends on where they are. Just again to emphasize a few considerations to make. Okay. Good. But we can, so let me say, this can seem a little bit complicated to navigate, but it's just, that's why it's essential that you have at least this basic knowledge of the EUDR, for example, because it doesn't mean what I'm not necessarily saying that if you use upcycled or recycled materials, then you have no worries. You also have to be careful about which ones you use. But it is a potential solution that most likely will be less demanding than doing the whole geolocation yourself. Good. Next one, recyclability rates. This here is just to prompt you to also think about the recyclability of your products. This is more related to eco-design, of course. But it's also an important consideration to make. Let's see. Yeah, we still have some time, so I will just give you a few seconds if any of you want to respond. But then the questions change a little bit in nature after this, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Good. And we can move on to the next one. It takes a little longer. Here you have an open choice possibility to answer on whether you've been testing or adapting alternative design choices to optimize sustainability. This is an inevitable part of the process, and the earlier you begin, the better. That, of course, in few cases, you will just be able to go out and find the perfect solution and then adopt it into your practices and your supply chains or in your production. Most of the time, you'll have to test and adapt different solutions. When it comes to design of the products in particular, this is something that is a bit of a trial and error exercise. Yes. Okay. Thank you also, Isabella, for sharing a free online way to calculate carbon footprint. The link is in the chat, and we will share it afterwards as well. Hope like I'll just leave a few more a little longer in the hope that somebody has something to share. Whether and what we're hoping is that you will share what kind of product this is related to, for example, or what kind of alternative design. What was the consideration? Was it to reduce use of material? Was it to make it more easily packaged so that you need less space, less container space to freight it, which again is both an economic consideration, but also an environmental one. There could be different types of considerations you've made in terms of the design of your product. Just leave it a little bit longer and we can move on. But in the meantime, also, if there are any further questions, please don't hesitate. I have a little bit more time to look through the chat now while we're doing this. But the whole point of this part of the webinar is essentially to give you an indication of what kind of considerations you have to make, how you can make research into what fits your particular context. Because, of course, solutions will vary over different types of producers and different types of products. So we can't give you the one-size-fits-all solution. But what we can at least do is to help you guide you down the right direction in finding the solutions that work for you. And so one response that, yes, monomaterials, natural dyes, packaging out of recycled materials. not sure what monomaterials mean. Maybe anyone can clarify. I assume it means not mixed fibers.
Yes, that was me again. So no mixed fibers and no different kinds of fabrics on one garment, for example.
Mm.
So I remember one of the training questions, somebody asked questions about trims. So when we use trims,
Yeah.
for example, it is a lot more sustainable to use and the same fabric kind for the trim as for the base of the clothes, because this is where the challenges for recycling, upcycling are lying down, as to how to split those different materials when your garment is in cotton and your trim is polyester, for example, just to give an example. So the idea is to stay as much possible within monomaterials, so that when that garment goes to, for example, a cotton reprocessing factory, it is 100% cotton and not a piece in cotton, another piece in something else. And absolutely no blends. So no blended yarn in our case, or fabric, if possible, natural, of course, but mono fabric. So we do use polyester based fabrics as well, but we try to make it just polyester then, no blends as much as possible. And the packaging, we are using recycled cardboards for packaging as well. So of course we're not recycling the cardboard ourselves, but we're trying to get it from a provider where it comes from recycling and not, from deforestation.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, as again, an important point to consider when also when you're dealing with recycled materials. It's not that it's the silver bullet. You have to still be aware of where it comes from. I think this is another important consideration, especially for the eco design, where this will heavily affect the recyclability, upcyclability, reusability of products, of course, especially garments. Pashak also shared a few webinars back, if I'm not mistaken, that I believe it's less than 1% of mixed fibers are able to be recycled and reused. Or let's say recycled or upcycled. So I mean to separate the different fibers of mixed fiber garments. I remember specifically that there was this big by some fashion brands that they were collecting back old clothes that they had sold for their sustainability activities of recycling or whatever, which I think, especially because of this finding that so little of the fibers could actually be reused when they're mixed, turned out to be a complete scam. So please don't fall into that trap. That I think this is a very important practice to integrate if you aren't already on no mixed materials. Good. Let me see. I think we can easily go to the next one. I had something that came to mind. I'll see if I can remember before we end in a few minutes. Let's see. This is the same question. Okay. So just a few also look at what other things you could collect information and data on, and later on report on, depending on what regulation we'd be talking about, whether eco-design or EUDR. It could be, for example, test results for product lifespan, life cycle assessment, packaging type, repairability, and repair instructions. Repair instructions is supposed to be part of the digital product passport, for example. So this is already something you should also consider. And I believe, again, no mixed fibers for garments also improves how easily repairable they can be. But I think this also has to do with how they're stitched together, maybe, and the cuts. So another point to to consider. I just remembered the other point I had in terms of, because you mentioned also, Isabella, recycling packaging. And I know that one of our members, I don't believe they're here today, but one of our members had this practice in particular of the boxes in which they received products from their producers. They reused directly, and then sometimes cut them to fit the orders that they would send on to their buyers. I think in this case, perhaps this worked better for business to business, but I'm sure that's something many of you deal in any case. But this is one relatively easy to introduce practice that you can do that will save you a lot of packaging material. And what they did to make sure that there were no confusion about that the package was from them, even if it had all the stamps and everything from a previous, let's say, from a previous, how would you say that? What's the word? I mean, from a previous postal journey. So the to and from and etc. The maybe some customs declaration, etc. They would have a sticker with their logo and information that they put on top of these. Improves brand visibility, I would say, and at the same time avoids any misunderstandings. So this is one thing that can be considered again to reduce packaging material. Then I think one that goes a little bit closer, or some again suggestions of things you can collect information or data on and report on it, would be indicators like worker wages, social audits and standards. They are a bit closer to home for us at WFTO, of course. So this is something that I believe should be easier for many of you, and which is something that we also consider you encourage you to consider. Sorry. Then, of course, chemical safety and transportation footprint become a little bit more green or environmentally concerned. But they are, I mean, we have to remember that the regulations we are talking about are, first of all, environmental regulations. So these are also aspects that will be covered. And chemical safety, of course, also relates to the working environment of your workers or producers or suppliers. So for this reason, it's also an important indicator to keep in mind. Good. This is the last part of the Mentimeter. So, okay, I see already there are actually quite a lot of responses suddenly. So that's very good to see. Yeah, social audits and standards. It's very good that information is collected on that. It's something we do in WFTO, and this will be easier for you, I'm sure. Transportation footprint. Isabella shared a calculator that we will also share in the follow-up email. That can help you with that if you aren't using something already. And I might suggest, but correct me if I'm wrong, Isabella, that tool is a free online tool, which can probably be a good first start. But
Yes,
you might
the
need
2031 is a pretty nice, user-friendly, easy way to kind of dip our toes into those calculations, and it's totally free. This CIMA Pro, as I said, is something very expensive.
Mhm. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe this is a good first start, and that at some point you might need some more professional help for this, unless you are able to find some tools that you can train your own staff in using. But I think the 2030 calculators is a very good start that could get you along the way. Okay, good. But actually, I think that would be a good conclusion for the webinar so far. I'm already a little bit over time, so I'm glad to see that you're all still here. Any last questions, please don't hesitate to put them in chat, and I'm happy to stay a few more minutes. But I think formally, otherwise, I'd just like to thank all of you for your participation. We will send a follow-up email on this webinar where you can access the recording. We'll make the slides available for you. And we'll also share the tools that Isabella, for example, has shared in the chat. Along with, later on, we will also share a more comprehensive toolkit that goes a little bit, that summarizes much of the information I've shared here as well, but we'll also go a little bit more into detail on some of the more sticky points, let's say, that we know can be a challenge for most of you. Now, what I really would like to encourage you all is to give us feedback on how helpful the tools are and whether there's still questions that come up even with these tools. I'm not promising that we can give you the answers necessarily to these questions, but we can certainly work on them. And if there are enough members with an interest in or with similar challenges, what we can at least do is to try to link up with those that maybe have managed to overcome the challenges to share experience, or we can collect that experience and share it with members in a more generalized form that could make it easier to take up. This is part of our job, I believe, as at least as WFTO Europe, to service our members in this way. So we're very happy to do that, but we will need your input for that. It's just what I would like to emphasize. And indeed, Siptespal, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you all for your participation. I don't see any further questions right now, but then please also for the follow-up email, please keep an eye out for a short survey that we'd like you to fill in. So we have a little bit of feedback and documentation for your participation in this webinar, and know a bit better how we can improve for the future. But this is particularly also because this is part of a project. So we would like to show indeed, hopefully, that this was helpful to you. And if it wasn't, then we would at least very much like to know how we could make it helpful for you in the future.
Well, Mikkel, thank you very much. I know I learned quite a lot today. This is not my area of expertise, so a lot of useful information, and I am very impatient to see the tools and the additional documents which we'll put in place. And indeed, we have a good opportunity to most probably continue this project beyond 2026 as well. So all your input is very, very important so that we can also design next webinars, next activities, next quote-unquote interventions according to your needs. So as Mikkel said, it's very important that you send us emails and you reply to the survey and let us know, was it good, was it not good, what are your specific pinpoints. I'm sure it's changes from industry to industry. So it would be good to have that information. Thank you for all, and Mikkel, thank you so much for this very long but very full session today.
Thank you all indeed for your participation. Have a good day.